Well, good afternoon. Here in the heat of the day now, I'm going back through and pulling up some of the videos that I've shot almost a year ago, part of them, and up until present time. So I'm going back through, and this is some stuff that I've already shot for the Midget Mustang. And I'm trying to go through and catch up on a lot of this stuff. I took a little hiatus from YouTube and kind of getting back in the swing of things now. And I shot quite a few clips on a whole lot of stuff that I normally do here, and I'm just now getting around to going back and going through some of those and getting them organized and edited and everything. So what you're going to see is firewall attachments is the primary focus of this one, although I did form I think stabilizer spars at the end of this or something. But anyway, this is stuff that I shot about firewall attachments. And if you followed me, you know that I've got a older set of Midget Mustang plans, and then I bought a new set of Midget Mustang plans. So I scratch building these, I compare the two sets of plans, and I'm looking for differences or things that may not be real clear on one set of plans or the other. I'm building primarily off of the new plans, but I've also studied the old plans enough to where I find quite a few discrepancies between them, and that's what we're talking about today, is the firewall discrepancies. Now, I guess first off, let me give my little disclaimer, because even though it's in the description and everything, this is the way I've chosen to build this airplane. You know, do your own research. You got to be big grown-up people and decide for yourself what's safe, what's not, and how you want to proceed with these things if you're building one of these airplanes or any airplane or anything else. So this is what I've chosen to do. Now, you're going to see a clip here. The first clip shows me comparing plans, and it's firewall attachments. And the new plans show 2024 T3 aluminum for the plates that mount to the firewall itself. And then there's the attachment that attaches the stringers and goes rearward towards the next bulkhead. And then on the other side, why the bolt protrudes through, and that's where your motor mount mounts on those 4 points that it will mount on. The new plans show that the flat plate is being 2024, and it attaches with 6 rivets per bracket. There's 4 of those brackets, of course. It shows the bracket coming back off of there and attaching to the springers going rearward as being 4130. So that's the way it shows on the new plans. The bolt goes through those mounting attachments into the firewall, and that all sandwiches them together and holds them. When you look at the old plans, they call that plate out as being 1025, and then the brackets coming back at it, or coming back off of that, as being 4130 and being a welded assembly. So that's one assembly there. I questioned that and thought there was a problem with the new plans. So I ended up and posed that question to the Mustang list, the IO groups list, and got a response back from an individual saying that he'd talked to Chris about this some time ago, and that it was correct to have the aluminum mounting brackets, and then that bolt holding them through was sufficient. It didn't need to be a welded assembly. So I have kind of a few issues with that, but then I have a lot of issues anyway with some of the things that are done on the plans for this airplane and the way it's supported. So that's neither here nor there. But I think when you look at the plans on the new ones, they still show it as a welded assembly, yet they call out 2 different materials that you're not going to weld together. The plate itself that mounts to the firewall is attached with 6 rivets, and granted they're smaller than a bolt, but there's 6 of those rivets. And I'm sure the new plans are engineered correctly and would be perfectly sufficient, but there's six rivets holding that plate to the firewall, attaching the motor mount piece that comes off the back of that attaches to the stringers. I think that's got 6 rivets in it too, and yet we're holding that whole assembly together with just the one bolt. So what I've chosen to do, and I haven't decided if I'm going to use just standard 1025 or if I'm going to use 4130. I think in the video I said I decided to use 4130. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not, but I'm at least going to use 1025 and have that as being a welded assembly. I think the way the new plans show are going to be perfectly sufficient, but only the one bolt holding per corner kind of makes me not feel warm and fuzzy. So I prefer that to be a welded assembly. Now, I think in my mind the reasons that it was changed to just a bolted assembly, there's probably several of them. One of them, it's easier to manufacture. You're doing away with having a welded assembly that you may or may not be doing in-house, you know, has to be welded sufficiently to be sold with the kit. You may have alignment issues, and if they're not aligned correctly when you attach them to the stringer and everything's bolted together, you may be inducing stresses on them if they're not aligned correctly. My choice is to have a welded assembly there, so I'll jig those up, weld them all together, make sure I've got good alignment on them and everything, and mine will be welded up. So anyway, that's what I'm going to talk about later on. I guess the issue has been resolved. Like I say, the individual on the forum said that he'd spoken with Chris, and no, Chris had made that change. Now, I do think that the prints, if that's what they're going to do, should have been shown. They should have been redrawn and taken out that welded assembly, because it does show a welded up, you know, the two pieces welded up on the print, and there should have been a revision noted on the plans. There was 2 revisions to that plan sheet anyway. Both of them, I think the first one was 1963 and the next one was 1968, if I'm not correct, but nothing beyond that. And I think that's early enough they probably would not have changed to the aluminum and steel bolted together assembly back in 68. I think this was done later on after Chris took the company over. So I personally feel that those should have been changed, but you know, neither here nor there. But those are the kind of things that can stall out a project if you're not doing them. So anyway, I've kind of rambled on this. I'll show you a few clips of what I've got going on here. This was shot quite a while ago. I haven't posted anything on the Midget Mustang for almost a year now. There has been progress being made on it, as well as my 701 and all of my other projects that I've got going in the shop. So anyway, we'll catch up on those, and some of those are nearing completion or being finished up and things like that. So anyway, we'll get on with the show here. All right, playing here over Memorial Weekend. Playing with the Midget Mustang a little bit today, mainly because I've got materials that I've got sitting in the way. So I've got some partial sheet of 32 thousandths that I'm going to cut up, and I've got a little bit of 40 thousandths left. So that's what I'm working on today, is some 40 thousandths. Been working on the firewall. The firewall is formed up back here, and found some discrepancies on the plans that I thought I'd share with you, and you know, just for information purposes, and see what you can do with it what you will. So anyway, let me move this down here so you can see these, see the plans. I've got my new set of plans here now. I've compared them to my old set of plans, and there's some differences between them. Okay, it's kind of hard to tell on my viewfinder here, but hopefully I've got us all here and in focus. You should focus all right. So firewall's formed. We're looking at the back side of the firewall here. And I was working on these brackets, and these are the firewall attach plates, they're calling them. And when we look at materials called at, it's 63 thousandths 2024 T3. I'm not sure that's right. I'm sure it's not right, is what I'm sure of. So this is the attach plate, which is this plate right up here. And then this plate forms up and attaches to it. Now they're showing it as a welded assembly because we're seeing welds here. And when you look at the builder manual, it calls out as a welded assembly. This engine mount bracket, which goes on, and then this part, this stringer affixed to it once this is formed up. They're calling this out as 63 thousandths 4130 steel. So I went ahead and I started building them. I've got a stack of these that are rough cut out, that are junk basically now. But when I go back and look at the original plans that I've got, it shows this plate as being 1025 steel, just mild steel. And someplace along the way, this has had 2 revisions, once in 63 and once in 65. So I think something got lost in the translation. And when you look at the builder's manual, which I don't think the builder's manual has been updated at all, it shows it as them being welded together and says to weld them together in there. So what I'm going to do, and I think it's a pretty safe assumption, is I'm probably going to use 4130 for this attached plate. And I haven't looked to see if I've got any, so I've just stopped on this, and I'll think about it a little bit more. But I don't think you'd be remiss at all by just using that or building that out of 1025. Since I'm going to weld them together anyway, and I'm going to TIG weld them together, I think I'll just use 4130 plate, and I think we'll be just fine there to get those welded up assemblies. What I'm going to work on today is these stringers, and it's going to rivet to this bracket here once it's done. I don't know how much of this I'm going to show. I've got enough 40 thousandths that I can cut out the 4 stringer brackets for these, and I'm not going to form them up today. I'm going to go ahead and lay them out and cut them out into rectangles, and I'll probably go ahead and form them. And like I say, how much of that I'm going to show, I don't know, but I'm not going to do the final forming until I've built these two so I can match them together, because this has to fit over that. So anyway, the other discrepancy that I find with the plans is here for the angle iron here, it shows 1/8 inch by 1 by 1 angle and 2024 T4 aluminum. Now, when you look at the materials list that's supplied by Mustang Aero, and they give you the list of what they supply in the kits, and if you want to order individual parts, I guess, whatever the case may be, it shows this is 1/8 by 1 by 1 angle, but they're shipping 6061 T aluminum with it. So I'm going to go back and use 6061 on this. You know, if they're shipping it in the kit with that, why, I don't see why it's not good enough to put on here. Saves a fair amount of money, and a fair amount of money on shipping too, to get those in, although you could order cut pieces. But the 2024 angle has been a little bit tough to come by anyway. I needed a piece on one of the stringers, and I think it's the rear spar mounts, whatever bulkhead that is. Let's see, yeah, it's this one here. It's this bulkhead. 9935, is that what we're looking at here? Because we're also looking at, yeah, it's 9935, and this aluminum angle here is called out as 2024. So, and that's what I've got there, is the 2024 to go there. Anyway, just something to be aware of. You know, there's been a whole lot of revisions along the way that are called out in the build manual and in some of the addendums that go along with it. So it's quite the puzzle to figure out what's actually going where. But anyway, I think this is a biggie here. I think that is not supposed to be 2024. I think that is probably most definitely supposed to be a steel of one sort or another. And I think 1025 would probably be all right, but I think I'll probably use 4130 there. So if anybody's got any comments, better suggestions, knows more than I do about that, which is a lot of people know more about it than I do, why, let me know in the comment section below. So I'll get around to, I'm going to clear this off and go ahead and start cutting out my aluminum. And these are all, I'm going to cut these all 3.5 inches wide. They need to be 21 inches long. We've got enough off of there. Yeah, we can use that as a straight edge, I think, at least for the first one. And these are only 3.5 on one end. I could stagger them back and forth and make them get a little bit more out of this piece of material, but I'm not going to screw around with it. We're going to cut them and call it good. That actually are 3.5. Yep, looks pretty good right there. guess I don't have it on either of them. I had gone back, and I'd shown how to do it before. I had gone back and ground around the radius of there to give us a sharp edge, and it worked real good to cut the plastic. You could just hook it in there. And I'm just going to cut 4 blanks like that. Okay, and then we got a 1-inch inside on this. So I'm just doing these as our reference right now. I'm not going to form these up. But if we would do our reference lines here. If we come down 3.5 instead of 3. And from this end we come up 3. Okay, then we've got our 3/4 mark here. The long, slow process of airplane building. Okay, let's clean up our lines just a little bit here. Okay, so that's what they look like when they're all laid out. And I'm probably going to cut these on the bandsaw, I think. Just because I think it might be a little bit easier. I could probably cut them on the Beverly shear pretty easy. Actually, let me go and do one on the shear real quick. I'll be right back. Actually, those work really well. I left a little bit proud all the way around. Give us room to clean it up. But there's initial first blank. Now I'm leaving a little bit of extra material just to file away on these, just because. And I can potentially clean these little corners out either with the bandsaw. I'll probably just file them out. We're close enough to where it's not going to be that big an issue, really. But that's a rough trim blank there. There's 3 of them. This is the last one right here. Now this is actually a B1 Beverly shear. There's Harbor Freight clones out there, and I imagine from other places too, but you see them on Harbor Freight a whole lot cheaper. I can't compare them to, I can't give you any insight as to how well they work compared to this. This is one that I rebuilt several years ago and built a stand underneath it. I'll actually link it below if you're interested in it. But it works really well. I mean, it's not the only way to accomplish things, but it's one more tool to hopefully do things relatively quicker and easier if you're a scratch builder. I did want a stomp shear, but the reality is I don't have the space for it. And so for right now, I'm going to have to do without, and that's where an Olfa cutter comes in real well especially on the Zenith planes because they work so well on there. Just using a little Olfa cutter to cut the cut your straight lines. So there again, you make do with what you got. So there's all 4 of my blanks to this point in time. I'll take and go ahead and file down the edges. I won't bother to bore you with that, but I'll bring you back and we'll look at the blanks before they're folded up. I'm not going to fold them yet, as I said before. You know, this could be done on my leaf shear. I'm going to wait and do these on press brake and get hopefully a little bit better results, and we'll just see what happens. That's, you know, I've got enough of a fabrication shop that we can build some custom tooling to do stuff like that. So anyway, that's where we're at for now. We'll bring you back once we get them smoothed out and take a look at them then. Well, I'm just talking away and then realized I hadn't even started the camera. So there's my 4 little pieces done to this point. And to recap what I just told you that you didn't hear because I didn't record it, was what I did is I hit these with some real fine sandpaper, just on my little orbital sander. Then I switched over to a piece of Scotch-Brite, and I just run Scotch-Brite across them. I've left these ends to use as references because I'm going to run these through with a press brake on an actual form die for these. And I won't do that yet for a couple reasons. One is I want the motor mount brackets that these attach to be all done so I can fit them together and make sure I've got the right dimensions on them. And the other is I have not finished my bigger press brake to be able to handle these. So that's an upcoming project that will be going on to more airplane building tools to build more tools. So that's what I've got. Hit them with Scotch-Brite. I still will go back and run these on the edge of a Scotch-Brite wheel. Normally I leave just one of these wheels, which is normally just a straight wheel, set up in a small cheap drill press and just deburr edges along there. I'll pick up a new wheel. This one's pretty well ratted out, so I'll pick up a new one and then I'll run it along these edges just to smooth them up a little bit more. And then these parts will be ready to be formed up. Once I get them formed, well, then I'll go back and hand finish these on the insides, and on the outsides I'll still be able to finish them with a Scotch-Brite wheel, but on the insides I'll just have to reach in and scuff them. So anyway, there's that part just about done. So that's what I've got for you today. Okay, this morning what I'm doing is I've got this partial sheet of 32 thousandths that I'm working with, and I'm just cutting it up into pieces. Spar webs and spars, things like that. Right now this is the last blank for the elevator spar, and I needed 2 of these. It's 32 thousandths, and I've got them cut out. Now this is the first one, well, this is the first successful one that I've done, and it's fine. It's right on target. You know, it measures out real nice. I'm real happy with it. But to get here, I've already wasted 2 other ones, and I made test bends and everything else, and I still screwed up two in a row. So anyway, I got the first one done. I need one more. Here's the blank for it. I just thought I'd take you along very quickly and show you the progress to this point. The first couple I laid out all the dimensions on them. These I've got it since I'm bending them with the brake. I know where I'm setting them up in the brake, so I put no dimensions on them other than just the external of it. So I'm running Scotch-Brite pad over it real quick. And that's all the farther I'm taking them right now. The edges are still going to have to be tuned up a little bit, but I can do that later on. This initially gets them cleaned up and ready to probably etch an anodyne is what I'm going to do on these. So anyway, let's go down to the brake and take a look at that. All right, so today I'm just working with a little home-built help brake. If I was going to build a brake to work on a Midget Mustang, or basically anything out of 2024 aluminum, this is probably the brake I would build. You know, I've got the bigger brake that the Max Machine brake, which is actually no longer available, I don't believe. But the plans are still available for this. I did a build series on this way back when. I'll try and remember and link it in the description down below or put a card up above. This will do a very large majority of what you're going to want to bend, and once you figure out bend radiuses and everything, why, it works really well. Now I will say that it was originally designed for building some of the Zenith aircraft, I believe, and it's primarily out of 6061 T6, whereas this is 2024. You get to 32 thousandths, and it's about all this brake wants to do. Even in this length, it's starting to deflect a little bit, but it will still do what it's supposed to be doing. So anyway, the dimensions I've come up with on this is we want 3/4 of an inch out from the brake, gives us our 5/8 radius. And let's see if we can't get that set on both ends, and it's worth taking the time to diddle around with it so we don't mess up the part. And like I say, 2024 at 32 thousandths, it's actually starting to deflect in the middle a little bit. I increased the tension, but we're getting close to the limit of what it will do. But it gives us a nice straight bend. So now, with only a 1-inch dimension on this side, we're crowding. We really have to watch on this end here on the smaller 1-inch dimension, because you have to make sure you work it down in there a little bit to get where you want to be with that end. And we can see just a little bit of bow there in the middle, but all in all, that's a real nice part. And dimension-wise, we're right at our 2 3/4 on this end. We should have 1 inch on the other end. Right there. So I'm very happy with that. So anyway, I'm going to continue on. Like I say, I'm just going through sheets and building what parts I can. And there's some other rudder components that I don't have. I want to fit to them, and I need to build form blocks for the main vertical fin and stuff. So I've cut blanks for those. Just trying to condense down some of the materials I've got sitting here. But anyway, that gives me the I'll go back and clean up this edge. That's a pretty ragged edge right there on that side. Actually, on both sides of this blank. But that gives me the proper dimensions. That gives me a matched set of elevator spars. So I'll mark those with what the part is, and then I'll mark it on what sheet they're on. I'll make a notation in pencil on the plan sheet saying that they're either a blank cut and the date, or that they're done in a date. In this case, I'll put done on there with the knowledge that I am going to have to tune them a little bit when I go to assemble those components. So anyway, that's kind of all I'm doing today. Quick little blurb there. So we'll carry on.